Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here, and I am back again with another Creative Cow tutorial. And in our ongoing look at learning Avid's Media Composer and Symphony, let's continue our look at the Marquee title tool. And in this lesson, we're actually going to take a look at two different things. First, we're going to take a look at how to do some animation, some basic animation inside of the Marquee title tool. I'm going to show you why you're going to want to do your animations inside of Marquee as opposed to doing them when you quit out of Marquee and get back into Symphony or Media Composer. And second of all, to go along with that sort of hand in hand, we're going to talk about exporting your titles back to Media Composer and Symphony. And I'm going to show you how it's going to work in two instances, obviously with an animation and then with a still frame. Okay, short introduction here. Let's just get into Symphony and let's get started. Okay, so let's Alt-Tab into Avid's Symphony, obviously Command-Tab for all of my Mac friends out there. And we're going to sort of break this up into two sort of schools of thought. One is going to be how to do just a basic still, a still frame, a still title, and how we're going to get that back into the Symphony or Media Composer editing application to work with. And I'm going to show you sort of the downsides of saving something out and then animating it after the fact. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go back into Marquee and we're going to do a basic animation. I'm going to show you how simple it is to create an animation, how you can get in and adjust parameters quickly and easily, and then how we're going to save that file back out to work with in our timeline. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to need is a title to work with. What I'm going to do is just open my sequences bin here. We're going to navigate up to Clip. I'm going to come down to New Title. What's going to happen is I'm going to be prompted as to which title tool I want to use. Of course, we are working in Marquee here. Now you'll see that my Marquee opened up a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come to View here. And what we're going to do is just say Show All Toolbar Buttons. In most cases, this is how I like to work, just so that I can see everything and I have it at my disposal just in case I need it. I'm just going to rearrange things a little bit here just so that I can see all of my different windows. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just turn on my saves. We're going to add some text in here. Why don't we just type in BMXing, since that's the footage that we like to work with. Now, of course, as always, I like to go with impact, and we're going to snap it to our safe title here. We're going to expand the bounding box all the way out, and let's just increase the size of our text. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create some 3D extruded text. Why not? So again, very easy to do that. What we're going to do is navigate over here to the Effects tab in the Transform Properties. You'll see it right down here, Extrude Depth. We're just going to grab it, drag it way out. You'll notice it doesn't look the way that we want it to. Why is that? Well, because we don't have lighting enabled. So let's enable lighting. You'll see title looks very cool, very nice and extruded. And what we want to do is we want to save this title back to Media Composer or Symphony to work with inside of our timeline. So how do we do that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate up to File at the top. We're going to come down to Save All to Bin. You'll see almost instantly we've popped back into the Symphony interface, and I'm asked, what do I want to save this title as? We'll just call it, appropriately enough, BMXing, but I'm going to call it Still, just so we can differentiate between the still and the animated version of it. I'm going to say Save. There's the title right there. So let's get some footage to work with here. So what I'm going to do is let's just drop down other bins. We'll come to Motocross here. And it doesn't even really matter which shot I pick. Sure, we'll take this one. What I'm going to do, select the entire clip by hitting T on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows. We're going to hit B to edit this into the timeline. Obviously, I'm going to be prompted, what bin do I want to put this in? It's going to be a sequence, so let's stick it into the sequences bin. I'm simply going to say OK. I'm going to hit Control and Y on the keyboard, Command and Y for all my Mac friends. I'm going to turn off and turn on this layer so I auto patch up to it. And let's head back to my sequences bin here so I can grab my title here. There it is. Now let's take BMXing and we're just going to drop it in the entire length of this clip. The clip's not that long. It's only about 7 seconds here. There we go. Very cool. And now let's animate this. What I actually want to do is have the text rotate on the Y-axis so I can see the extrusion. So what most people think I would do is I would step into effects mode. Again, effects mode, my shortcut, Shift and Y. If you don't have effects mode mapped on your keyboard, no problem. You can find it right here, or you can find it right over here. Now again, what most people think is the logical step here is they're going to navigate down to the 3D button. We're going to promote this to 3D. We're simply going to come up to rotation, and we're going to grab the Y parameter and rotate it. Let's just spin it around. The only problem is that it completely loses its 3D look, because once this title is saved out as a still, it is a flat element. There's no 3D information involved in this title, which completely defeats the whole point of doing what we did. We actually want to have this title rotate. And what we're going to do is we're going to animate it so the title starts on its side and it rotates forward and is scaling slowly towards us as it comes to a stop in a span of about 15 seconds. Like I said, this completely doesn't accomplish what we want, but if you're simply creating still titles, what I'm going to do is just undo what I just did. If you're simply creating still titles, and let's say this was a bug you were going to put in the lower left-hand corner, you know what? It's actually going to work very well for that purpose. What I'm going to do here is we're just going to scale this element down here. I'm just going to grab the bounding box. We'll scale it down. You know, I said maybe stick it in the lower left corner as a bug. No problem. Maybe our show's called BMXing, and guess what? Works perfect just like that as a still bug. But like I said, once we want to get in and start rotating this around, that's when we start to run into problems. And I say problems, it's not really a problem at all. It's just a new way of thinking that you're going to need to adopt when you're working in Marquee. So let's get back into Marquee and let me show you how we can animate this element very quickly and very easily. Okay, now instead of updating this title, let's just create a brand new one. What I'm going to do is simply navigate to Clip. We're going to come to New Title. We're going to promote this title here to Marquee, of course. Now we're just going to ignore the fact that BMXing is here right now. I don't even need to worry about that. What I'm going to do is just turn the background off because I don't need to see it for right now. What I'm going to do is turn on my saves here, and we're going to do the exact same thing we just did. We're going to type in BMXing. Again, exactly the same font, Impact. I love that font. Again, we're just going to take it, stretch it out the entire width of save title here. Let's just increase the size. Very cool. You'll see that when creating 3D extruded titles, it almost becomes sort of like, you know, second nature. You really don't even think about it. It's so simple. Okay, so here we go. So let's create a basic animation. Now the first thing I need to do is establish how long I actually want this animation to be. And in this case, I want it to be 15 seconds long. So let's set this title to be 15 seconds. What I'm going to do is navigate up to File. I'm going to come down to Duration. You'll see right now the duration as a default is set to 5 seconds. So let's set that to 15 seconds. And I'm going to say OK. Now we don't see anything happen here because we're not actually in animation mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate up to Tool Sets, and we're simply going to come down to Basic Animation. Now you'll see as soon as I switch over now I can see a timeline that has the 15 seconds here. So what we want to do is we actually want to animate this. Now what we're going to do here first is just close this window a little bit here just so that I can see my tools. You'll see my window up here has gotten a bit messed up here. So let's come back to View, and what we're going to do is we're just going to say show me everything. There we go. That's looking much better, much easier to see now. Okay, so let's animate this. Now there's one important thing we need to do before we start animating anything. And that's we actually need to turn animation on. And how we do that is that we actually get a new icon that appears when we switch to animation mode that's located right here above the selection tool, and it's called, appropriately enough, animation mode. So what I'm going to do is simply turn animation mode on, and all I'm going to do in this case, like I said, is I'm going to have this title start sort of at about 50%. We're going to have it rotated as well on the y-axis 90 degrees, and it's going to move towards the screen and rotate towards us to then establish itself as being BMXing. So let's set this up. What we're going to do here is first, I'm going to come actually down to the end of the title here. And I'm just going to grab the title here, and what I want to see here is I'm just going to come to my to my window, sorry. I'm going to come down to my properties, and I want to see my transform properties, because what I'm going to do here is just adjust this just so we can make sure that this is set exactly the way we want. There we go. So now a keyframe has now been set at the very end because I made a slight modification and then adjusted it back to one of my transform properties, in this case scale. So what I'm going to do now, simply come all the way back to the beginning, and let's set the initial animation keyframes. All I'm going to do for scale is put the scale value for 50 on the X, and we're going to do the exact same thing on the Y. Now I don't need to adjust anything for the Z. We're going to leave that the way that it is. And the next thing I want to do is I want to adjust the Y rotation to be 90 degrees. So the title is going to sit on its side. Now because I have animation mode turned on, you're going to see now that if I grab the title and I start to drag, this is going to move towards the screen here. Now the only problem is you'll see that it hasn't adjusted the way that we wanted it to. So all I'm going to do now is simply just adjust these parameters to be 100, and we're going to set the rotation to be 0. And what will happen now here is if I come back, there we go, there's our title moving out just like that. Now you know what, looking at the extrusion depth, it's a little bit too big. So all I'm going to do is simply turn animation mode off. What we're going to do now is we're going to come back to our effect here. Again, remember, it's located inside effect. I'm going to make this about half the size. Maybe we'll make it about 15. That's much nicer. Now, because I have animation mode turned off, everything's going to be exactly the same. It's just that my extrusion is about half as deep as it was before. Now, there's something else that I'm thinking. I'm thinking that I don't really want this rotation to take the entire length of the 15-second animation. I want it to sort of take to about here, and the rotation is done, and then the scale will keep happening to sort of finish the animation off. So how do we get in and adjust this? Now, well, most people would think, okay, we'll just come back to transform and punch in whatever value you want. But I don't want to do that. I actually want to see what is going on with these keyframes. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our layer, and we're going to click on the layer over here on the right-hand side, and you're going to see now that we have a little graph icon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the graph icon, and you're going to see now that the layer has expanded itself out. The only problem is that I still don't see anything. I don't see any of these parameters that I've adjusted. Now I know that I've adjusted 3 parameters. I adjusted scale X, I adjusted scale Y, and I adjusted rotation Y. Now like I said, it's rotation Y that I want to get in, and I want to make this adjustment to. So what we're going to do over here in properties is I'm going to come over here to transform. We're just going to expand that out. I'm going to come down to rotation, and I'm going to select rotation Y. And you're going to see now, there's my first keyframe, and there's my last keyframe. So all I'm going to do now is simply click on it, and we're going to drag it right the way over here, just like such, and guess what we now have? We now have our animation adjusted the way we want it to, so it's going to rotate around, it's going to establish itself here, and then keep scaling. So you see, getting in and adjusting these keyframes after you automatically add them in animation mode is very simple. I don't even need to turn animation mode back on. That's the best part, is I can just get in and just drag these keyframes wherever I want to move them to. Now it's also important to keep in mind is that I'm just going to collapse this layer again, is I can actually expand this layer out to see each one of the individual letters. So conceivably, I could have each letter, let's say, rotated on the y-axis to really establish each one of these letters individually, or I can adjust them as part of the text box that they are sitting in. So what we're going to do is just collapse that. You'll see there's the text box, and again, I can expand this out, and I can select each one of the individual letters here to get in and animate on their own. Now I wanted to just show you this basic animation, just so you sort of get the hang of how animation mode works. We're going to get into more complex animations in later tutorials, but I wanted you to see how this works and how simple this is. Well, now that I have this animation working the way that I want it to, and I'm very happy with it, what we're going to do is we're going to save this out. Now again, we're going to save this out exactly as we saved the previous one out. What we're going to do is navigate up to File. I'm going to come down to Save All to Bin. You'll see I'm going to be prompted as to what I want to call this. What I'm going to do is just call this BMXing. And I believe we called it still, so we'll call this one animated. Okay, we'll stick it back into sequences, and I'm going to say save. Now you're going to see that what's going to happen is that Marquee initially saved the title out, but what it's doing now is it's actually rendering out each one of the frames involved in making this animation. So instead of having a still frame like we had before, what's going to happen when this is done is this is going to be updated, and it's actually going to become an adjustable mat key. So take a look at what's going to happen here. Once our process is done, you'll see this process is going pretty quick for 3D extruded text right from within the interface. Now what's going to happen is that media is going to be created from the TIFF sequence that was rendered out of this. Now I'm actually going to show you some great tricks that we can do with that rendered out TIFF sequence in a later tutorial. What's happening now is the main RGB channel is being created, and now what's happening is that the alpha channel that's going to go along with that is being created as well. You'll see again, very, very quick. It's actually happening almost in real time. It's creating the media for that alpha channel right now. And again, each layer, remember, like I said, this animation was 15 seconds long, and each layer is taking about 15 seconds to render. So you'll see, we've got a ratio of 1:1 going there, which is pretty darn good. You'll see, there we go. One more, uncompressed alpha media. Again, all this happening very quickly. And once it's done here, we'll be all set to go. There we go. Now you'll see I can take this title, still called exactly the same thing. It's called Animated Title, Untitled Number 2. It's right up here in my preview window. It actually automatically put it in there. And what I can do now is simply just grab it and drag along, and there's my animation. And I can even hit play if I want to. And watch this play in real time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find a clip here that is about 15 seconds long. And this clip I think will work perfectly. What we're going to do is just drop this clip in. What we're going to do is come back to our animated title. I'm going to hit T on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows. I'm going to hit B to edit it in. Now obviously that clip is a little bit longer, 1 frame too long. And you'll see now, there we go. Now what I had thought that I had forgotten to do is I thought that I had forgot to turn the background back on, but that's okay because when it rendered it out, it knew that that alpha channel was there. And of course now the most important thing is I can hit play. And there it is, playing back in real time. 3D extruded text animated inside a Marquee, playing back in real time inside a Symphony. Very, very cool. So I hope this lesson has shown you a couple things. One, how you're going to easily be able to get into Marquee and start animating text so that you can actually keep it, in this case, if you're working with extruded text, keep it in real 3D so that when you bring it back into Symphony and Media Composer, you have that real 3D title animated exactly the way that you want. And I hope you've seen how simple it is to save out your static and animated titles out of Marquee to use in Media Composer and Symphony. Really, just a couple mouse clicks, and you're going to be ready to wow and amaze your clients every time. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, you have any tutorial requests, you can send them to kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot for watching.